I think with experience in competition of like, I know my pace. If I run my pace, just like you talk about all the time, if I go at my pace, it's going to be slower and it's going to set me off on the wrong foot. And I need to remember just how fit people are, and I need to level up to that competition.
Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. The full Goon Squad is back in the house. I was under the weather last week. Might still be under the weather currently, but we're here.
Whose weather?
Misfit Coach Flu Game. That's what this episode is. We have a very special guest today. Misfit Athletics athlete, CrossFit Games athlete, Misfit Athletics remote coach. Other things, Paige Semenza.
All around great person.
All around great person. Welcome back to the show, Paige.
Cat mom.
Cat mom.
Hi, guys. It's good to be back.
So we updated Snack Chat to Life Chat.
I've heard.
Partially because I couldn't say beef and rice every week. It was a little bit selfish. And I'm going to have everyone else go. And we'll use we'll probably say a bunch of stupid shit, and then you can say whatever you want, but then segue into a bigger picture, what's going on with Paige right now. We'll use that sort of as our runway to get in.
Sure.
So, like I said, flu game, I am bringing everything I got. So I'm double fisting currently. I got coffee. I got Focus-Aid. I popped some of this stuff. Before we got started, we got some rhodiola and some alpha GPC. The name of my new emo band is Sick Baby Sleep Patrol. So you already have to deal with me going blank because of my ADD.
That sounds like a band that I would have listened to.
Right? Exactly. Me too.
2004.
Me
Still
too.
listen to.
Oh, you don't know
With
that?
a T-shirt, Sick Baby Sleep Patrol. It looked like a comic book.
Ted.
All right, I'll make a note.
All right. So yeah, you already have to deal with my traumatic brain injuries and ADD in terms of my mind going blank. So let's crank that up another level today. That's about what I got going on in my life right now.
My life chat might be a snack chat a bit. Sorry, not sorry.
It's still better.
Is it the sexy calzone you sent me?
Yeah, I've really been dialing in my calzone.
Ted, idea,
lately.
t-shirt idea, sexy cut zone.
He sent it to
like
you, bro. You
dancing.
get it. That calzone trying to get the pipe.
Yeah, if you saw this calzone, you would know. It was
You guys see it, Drew.
so crispy, and I cut like the slits in the top, and the slit got all cheesy and gooey. That was what I sent to Shirt.
Oh no.
I hate this.
It was hot. Wait till you see it, bro. Wait till you see it.
All of
It
this.
was really good.
Tear will squirt out of your eye.
Welcome back, Paige.
I'm thinking about making a career adjustment and just sending calzones across the world. I don't know how I would do it, but
There's just
everybody
freeze
needs
stuff
calzone.
and get dry ice.
don't know.
So it seems to be what most people do.
You'd have to do like a pretty quick freeze on a calzone, though, right? Like at a grown-up hot pocket at that point.
What do they call it when they cook it part of the way? Like par bake?
Like par cook, yeah.
I think might have to be that because some
Al
of the
dente.
New York City pizza places ship pizzas around the country now, and you finish cooking them.
All right. Well, we'll start to test it out. I'll bring a par-cooked, half-frozen calzone in for Hunter to finish off. in
Sure,
his
just
oven
gonna
and see
eat
how
it
works.
without cooking it.
What's wrong with
Sure
it? No, I'm
keeps
gonna heat it up
talking about
to.
cheesy slits. I'm not gonna be hungry.
You watch your mouth.
And milky
To
tears and
mute.
Inappropriate.
That is so
I'm gonna get
unfair.
this. I'm gonna get Cody here.
T-shirts,
I'm gonna get the
T-shirt.
giggles.
Let's go.
Hunter, how's
milky
golf been
tears.
lately?
It's been good. I
Wet.
told Drew I got a hot take here, but yeah, I broke 100 again, so I'm pretty confident that the first time I did it was not purely luck.
3 or
It's been
2?
4. I've gotten 4.
4.
4. Yeah, including a nice
Wow.
including 91 in Scarborough over at Nonesuch. So pretty happy. Achieved my season goal of breaking 100, and I think I've done it enough times to say that it wasn't a fluke. Hot take. I haven't thought too much about this, but I think in
Hot take.
order, hitting a baseball, hitting a golf ball, and then the squat snatch are the three most difficult movements in sports.
In
are
that
the
order?
three most difficult things to do in sports.
In all of sports?
In all of sports. The three most challenging single movements you can do
I
in
feel like
sport
you're
in-
insinuating a skill base here, because obviously like an iron cross is harder,
yeah.
but you just have to be way stronger than everyone.
With saying what?
Just like an iron cross is probably there's less people that can do that than can hit a baseball, but a lot of that's
Yeah, I think
strength-based.
I think there's obviously there's a strength requirement there, but I think the body the hand-eye coordination, body coordination aspect of those three things are the three most difficult things to do in all of sports.
We're going to get hate mail from like a polo player, just so you know.
We can't talk about things that
All
I've
four of them?
never seen. Yeah.
I just watched the Sylvester Stallone documentary. It talks about how he was like a polo player and was trying to get good at it, but then his dad was like jealous of his ability and like his
Hey,
success with
yo,
like
give
riding
me a
Rocky.
mallet.
So his dad decided to spike him in the back with a croquet mallet. He landed up under the horse. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. You guys should watch it. It's on Netflix. But his dad and him had a really weird relationship. It was pretty wild.
You raised your eyebrows pretty quickly, Sherb. Do you have a separate comment about Hunter's List?
I'd have to think about it, and that would take some time. That feels like
Don't hurt
This is three. Exactly. I might hurt myself. It's like three things. There's got to be things that are more challenging than that. I just haven't committed any brain space to that. Like, I feel like a one-timer in hockey's got to be pretty fucking
handstand ramp
hard.
wedge is way harder than a squat snatch.
Getting up and down the pegboard.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, like all of those three
Parallel
things, the things they
traverse.
have in common is it's like it's one single thing. I'm not suggesting that it's like any of those things are easier than playing football or playing hockey. I'm saying like a single movement, a single coordinated body movement. I don't think there is anything more difficult than baseball. I can't speak to quite as much personally, but trying to tie that to like a golf swing, but then there's the variability of like a pitcher with a baseball, with a golf ball, like it's static. There's obviously a little bit of variance with how it's sitting and how far you are and temperature and the atmosphere, the environment and stuff like that. But all of those things at least partially come into play with baseball, and you're trying to hit something moving, somewhere between 80 and 100 miles an hour or more.
What
You
about,
ever
like,
tried to smack a shuttlecock? That's pretty difficult, bro.
Who's
I was a fucking shuttlecock slapping champ in high school.
I believe you.
Shut
that
the
on a
fuck
t-shirt?
up.
What about like free soloing like El Capitan? That's fucking skilled as fuck.
Yeah,
Single
but each
movement.
movement's not skilled, bro.
And a
But he had to do
single
that,
Grabbing
that
a rock.
single traverse where he had to practice a gazillion times, and he's like, I'm not
The
climbing this
karate
mountain
kick?
today because I might die.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
whatever
up
that
there.
is.
That's certainly up there.
Did you say squat clean, Hunter?
Snatch.
Okay,
Snatch.
because I was going to say. Are you
Squat,
insinuating
deadlift.
clean is more difficult than the snatch?
Paige, you want to weigh
Yeah,
in on this
I think
list?
doing
I-
doing them well.
Yeah.
I'd be curious if anybody's got any listener or anyone on the current podcast.
I was thinking of like last time I went ice skating with Ben, like doing it my whole life. I just, after 4 years of not getting on the ice, I could just turn and stop on a dime. And he's
you
like,
skated
I
for the
can't
first
figure
time in
this.
4 years.
Yeah, it had been a while. This was like maybe last year, 2 years ago.
Have you played hockey since you stopped playing hockey? When's the last
No.
time you played like a semi-competitive hockey game?
Gosh, 2015, 2016, and that.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I had actually been thinking about getting back on the ice. I just, beer league or all that, we call it D League, beer league, playing
Yeah.
with just a bunch of grown men kind of makes me nervous because they're not always in full control of themselves
'em up.
on the ice. Yeah. So more of just from the standpoint of not wanting to get hurt, but I have been like really wanting to get back on the ice. But I actually like thinking about that, like stopping on skates is very hard. Like some people just can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Skating
I
well
don't think I put
backwards
that.
is something. Because I played, like, my dad was really mean. He got me and my brother obsessed with hockey and then basically wouldn't let us play because of the schedule. So I played, like, pond
Yeah.
hockey growing
You're a
up
face
my
nerd.
whole life.
Eh.
And skating was okay. Stopping was okay. Like, but the people that could, like, fly down the ice backwards and, like, be in control, that was always the thing where I was like, there's no way without the 10,000 hours that shit's going to happen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it on the same level. I think you're making a good argument on those three things. The swing.
There's
yeah.
a 70-year-old
so.
man that plays in the Southern Maine Men's Baseball League named Cowboy. He throws 57 miles an hour. I can tell you, he is not hitting a baseball with him throwing it is not on the list. But then, yes, when you see a like mid to high 80s fastball for the first time, you're like, I will never touch that. That makes no sense.
I went to the batting cage like probably a batting cage like 2 years ago, and I was like, it was like 40, maybe 50 miles an hour, and I was just getting fucking dusted. And granted, I've never played.
They wheeled out grandma. She threw on her
never
hand.
played baseball at a higher level than like
Oh, that's
Little League
beautiful.
with like a pitching machine or a 30-mile-an-hour toss from a kid, but fuck.
Ted,
Ball
get your
coming at
camera.
you
We're going to the
twice
batting
that
cage
fast.
right now.
God.
We're going to the batting cage
That'd
be
right
fun.
fucking now.
You want the equivalent
Everyone
of me
Paige
throwing
is
a
up.
football?
We'll go
You
into a
think
batting cage.
you stop chirping my football throw because we've proven that that's
I can't say I would do it better,
inaccurate,
but
you take me to a batting cage, you might get your laughs.
Hunter, have you watched any jujitsu, like competitive high-level jujitsu at all?
it's a good call, Ted.
Or judo? Because some of the ippons that they or nippon, I don't know what they're called, but some of the throws that they do are super duper complicated and require like some of the craziest body control.
Seems
that
like
I could
physics
ever
defying
imagine.
when you watch it.
Yeah. The change of position and the change of like physical direction in microseconds is just insane.
Yeah, no, I've never watched. I can't say I've watched it.
I have a theory
closely
on
enough,
jujitsu that I have to talk to our friend Skip about. So
We should have him on the podcast.
my baby definitely does jujitsu naturally. He like yanks you by your beard and close. He'll grab your shirt. He does leg locks around my like neck, like the whole like hanging on and using positioning. It seems like a natural thing. So I'd be like very interested to see. Like I know a lot of like kids of parents at the gym do jujitsu. I'd be interested to hear if it like is like a natural thing because kids are always like clinging on to stuff and like climbing around. But like, I'm like, damn, this
it
dude
makes a lot of sense.
is gonna be like kick
Makes
my
a lot of
ass in like
sense.
6
Well,
months.
like
If you're a
Especially
human on your back, the only way that you can get to a position that's not on your back is to grab and hip out or like. So it makes sense that naturally would be like an inclination in human babies.
a lot of it's a desire for like physical contact, and boys in particular like wrestling with parents. Like you basically kids are
I do
learning
that shit
like
all the
what their
time.
strength is,
Sure.
like, or what's like too
You wrestle with
far, or
parents,
what's
sure?
you know.
Yeah.
Just
with dad.
Sherman
It's
Joyce,
a
just-
huge part of child development.
Sherb, you got any live chat?
Yeah, my nightly occurrence is fucking wrestling on the living room floor in front of the TV. Now, Halloween, since the last podcast, it was fun taking Z around to do that. He got pretty good at saying trick or treat and smell my feet, which is pretty fucking great. Even though
So
when he's
cute.
like 3 years old, it doesn't really sound like too much. But he tried to walk into a couple strangers' homes, which was terrifying. I'll tell you that for the first part, when he grabs the doorknob, opens it up, and walks in. He's like, grab him by his shirt and rip him back out. A little terrifying, but it's just funny to see how much he is like my wife. Like after like 20 houses, he's like, go home, play with cars. Go home, play with cars. So
What's his
that was
go-to
fun.
candy? I mean, this is serious shit.
Lollipop. He's a lollipop kid. I think it's the ease
Tootsie
of
Pop
eating
or
it.
Blow Pop?
No, like a dum dum. The most big lollipop
his
is fucking
dad.
Just
ginormous.
like his dad. Beat me to it.
Sure, but I have a question for you. So, as a parent, it's kind of innate that you're supposed to teach your kids to not take candy from strangers. Does that present like a weird situation during Halloween when you're like, hey, let's go find strangers to take candy from?
No, because we just amass as much candy as possible. I go home, I charge dad tax, which is 98%, and I leave him the lollipops. And I vet all the candy. I haven't died yet, so far so good. But realistically, just bring it all home, dump it on the
Just
floor.
getting you used to real life in the U.S., kid.
Yeah.
98% goes to the man.
Love teaching him the dad tax. All those full-size candy bars in the neighborhood are great. But yeah, no, he's cool about it. He's not crazy motivated by food. He's very unlike me in that regard. Like, I would eat all of my Halloween candy that night, and he's like, give me one M&M and I'm good. And I'm going to go play in the corner over there, so.
I don't know if I've ever heard a human described as food motivated.
You're sure?
You fucking sure about that, bro? You've known me for like 10 years. Come on now.
All right, Paige, we promised stupid shit for a certain amount of time. What is going on in your life?
No, when you guys were kids and you went trick-or-treating, did you ever have like the house where you had to go in and you had to sing a song or tell a joke? Whoa. Did you guys ever have to do that?
No.
Yeah.
Fuck
so our
no.
friend, it's actually funny. We were just talking about
That would
this.
be illegal
I don't like to.
in Southern
Yeah,
Maine.
I wouldn't like to do that.
Is this at
But
Penn
our
State?
friend, no, this isn't at Penn State. Our friend, their
Sure
family,
feeling
like
frisky today.
Let's let Paige
they have a
talk
big Halloween tradition to do that at their parents' house, which I thought was interesting. I've never done it before.
Is there a certain song you need to sing?
No, like you have to pick.
Oh,
So
any
you
song.
would,
Okay.
You'd have to pick a song or a joke. And actually, our friends went to both gym friends, gym members, and coaches. They went in, and the kid told like a solid dad joke, like right off the tip of his head, which I thought was fantastic. So
That's good
about.
stuff.
Is the candy
Yeah. I
like
didn't know if it
really
was
good
normal.
that you're getting that you have to?
I don't
Tootsie
know.
Roll.
It might be.
Yo,
I
those
don't know.
fruity
I'll
Tootsie
have to
Rolls are
ask.
so good.
I didn't get enough details.
Those are good.
Yeah, you gotta be
Real good.
you gotta be like, hey man, I can go one door down and not have to put up with this bullshit for the same candy. Like, what are you
got for me?
offering
Full
here?
size bars?
I think you're yeah, we got
That happened to me when I
full-size
was a
candy.
little kid. I
It
would've
might be some
stood-
advice.
Stood behind my parents and done nothing. Would have been like, no.
I could
Yeah,
totally
same.
see myself trolling trick-or-treaters. Dance, monkey. Yeah, there's a
Dance at my front steps. It's a good idea for next year.
Three Musketeers, toss it into the bush. Find it.
Dude, just go fetch. Just they walk up to your door, just throw it down the street.
Okay, life chat. Well, we just got home from Rogue 2 weekends ago, so that was Ted and Jen were there, which was awesome. My mom and Ben, so it was a small group of us this time, but it was an absolute blast. You know, I'd love to go back. I'd love to earn a trip back there. So this past week really just kind of was low key. You know, have a little bit of fun in the gym, but give my body some time to recover. And then nothing really, I mean, kind of easy, you know, simple. But we did start we have a sister business right next to us. They used to, one of the owners used to co-own both of them. It's called Gracie NEPA. So it's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu place. And we decided to join for a women's self-defense class for the next 6 weeks. So
Nice.
That's dope.
yeah, so something different. It's every Sunday. So we did our first one this Sunday. We actually did kind of an intro to some of our gym members specifically on Saturday. So that got me like really interested in wanting to do the 6-week course. And I think the most interesting thing for me is, you know, you're thinking of like bad situations as a female. You know, you're out running on a trail by yourself, you're in a bar, a creepy guy comes up to you. So I think the biggest thing for me is learning that you have to meet violence with violence. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're evil. You know what I mean? Like there's evil violence and then there's violence as self-defense. So it's been really interesting learning some of the techniques, and a lot like CrossFit, like it's very technique based, and it's very much like, you know, you start at a 25% and then you start to build up through repetition. So it's been really neat, been a nice little change of pace being in the jiu-jitsu place and just a different environment.
That's cool. I have
Yeah.
been like in my head thinking about this recently as a parent, because like physical altercations and like self-defense can often be very like ugly and scary, and something that you would not want to have like your child view. And jujitsu feels like a way, like anytime you see any of those clips of someone, like they're essentially disarming a person who's acting like a moron. I would much rather be able to do something like that in the name of self-defense in front of my family than like old school, like college days, like people punching each other in the face. That's not
Right.
something that I'm so interested in. So I keep hearing people talk about it and having good experiences. So after you do it for a few weeks, I might have some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a learning experience for me too. I'm not a violent person. It's not like I got in fights when I was a kid or anything like that, you know? So it's it's really a change in perspective, especially as a female. You know, if you're out on a running trail and there's this bigger, stronger, faster guy who's, you know, coming up on you, like, how do you defend that? So it's pretty cool.
That is cool.
It's kind of serious situations, you know, serious scenarios. So not to bring down the mood, but
well,
yeah,
I mean,
it's been cool.
There's a segue too. I mean, anytime it's, you know, regularly learn and play new sports and skill acquisition and body awareness, like anytime you're going to do something like that, there is a direct connection in just your overall physical pursuit, which is something that's like super important to you, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true.
So my first question for you, we have not spoken on the podcast since the CrossFit Games. We've actually talked about your CrossFit Games season a decent amount on the podcast. But I would love to hear your perspective on what your goal was at the games, how you sort of adjusted your thinking for that based on your back injury, and then maybe what you learned in your training and how you feel about training afterwards.
Yeah. So I thought I had, you know, despite the circumstances of having an injury, I thought I had a very successful games weekend. There's still some things looking back on it that, you know, I wish I could have done better. I usually I would say I think it was days 3 and 4, like my first event of the day just kind of was a rough start. But then, you know, things would get better as the weekend went or as the day went on. But, you know, I think I put a lot of effort this year into the mental side of it more than anything. And that's, you know, having to be resilient through an injury. So, it took a lot of communication with Gabe and a lot of communication with you to, you know, find a plan that would just keep me working towards the goal of being prepared for the games. So a lot of changes to strength had to happen. But it seemed as though the strength work that I did do really kind of favored into the games this year. We saw a lot of sandbag work. We saw some heavy sled stuff, and that was a lot of the stuff that I could do. So yeah, I mean, I think for me this year, it was more of the mental exhaustion more than the physical exhaustion coming off of the games. That's been taking me some time to, you know, fully recover from and get back to normal. Having Rogue really helped. I was getting to a point in training, like right after the games of, it was funny. I had wanted to talk to Gabe and I wanted to get on a phone call with him. And so we had planned for 3 days after I had messaged him about asking to talk. And all of a sudden Rogue pops up as an invite. So our whole conversation in that phone call went from my original plan to talk to him was about, you know, not sure if I want to compete this year, if I wanted to shift gears as far as you know, getting into what is going to be my career after CrossFit. And so that was my original, wanting to be the conversation with Gabe. And then Rogue pops up. So the whole conversation turns into, okay, what's going to be our plan for Rogue and how are we going to prep for it? So it came at a really good time. As far as you know, getting me back into the gym and having something to look forward to. And it also had given me a little bit of, you know, I still was stuck in this mental barrier of I don't want to pick up a heavy barbell off the floor. I'm still nervous too. And it kind of was well, we know Rogue is heavy. We know we're going to see heavy implements no matter what. So let's, you know, see if we can build up to 80% of a clean, see if we could build up to 80% of a snatch. So we did that with the 2 to 3 weeks of prepping that we actually did for Rogue. And then Rogue, as you guys saw, was hinging, more hinging, and then finished with some hinging. So to say the least, I had a very successful weekend, regardless of what it said on the leaderboard. It got me past a mental barrier that I've been struggling with since April. And it got me super excited to look into another year of, you know, getting after it again. So it's kind of where we're at right now, getting into phase 2. So I'm actually starting that up today. I stick to the Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday split. Just works better for me. So yeah, we're in a pretty good spot.
One of your biggest strengths, in my mind, my purview, is rising to the occasion. And that's something that you did, I mean, all the way from March or April, whenever it was, through Rogue. And the come down afterwards just reminds me a little bit of like Austin maybe like did or didn't have any business like putting himself through what he did the year before and making it to the games with the full-time job and all that, but it had just been such a long time coming, and somehow like trained well for the games and went out and performed pretty well with the amount of notice that he had. And rising to the occasion, no matter what, sort of, it becomes the norm. And sometimes we don't realize how far you're rising. Like sometimes it's just rising to the occasion for you. A lot of times, Paige, is like being very thoughtful in your training and then kicking it up a level at competition. So let's call it, that's this big of a gap. Some of the gaps that you just overcame in this past season were much larger and took much more energy, but you're just so used to figuring out how to do that. And like, it's gonna come around at some point.
Yeah.
Like it's going to come around, and obviously dealing with that, especially when it's potentially at a new level, like the amount of fatigue that you have physically and mentally at a new level, is something that this fall you have to like figure out. It's like kind of a new thing.
Yeah.
But the like rambling into the question is, I need one thing answered to ask the actual question. Did you get to practice at all on the logs at Rogue before the heat?
So they had them out there. The first day where we went over for registration, they were super wet, so I didn't hop up on it. Just the logs are going to stay soaked for a little while. It looked like they had taken some time to shave down at least the like small layer on them.
Got it.
So I didn't actually test them out till the day of the event, but they were in the back for us to warm up on.
So this question I'm going to try and phrase from the inner dialogue of an insecure athlete at a competition. 3, 2, 1, go. You shot out of a fucking cannon in that first one. Like you obviously continued to do so afterwards. In the self-talk of an athlete who would be scared to do so, the question is, who the fuck are you? Why do you get permission to go and do that, Paige? What gives you the mindset that, like, I don't exactly know what this is or how it's going to go, but it's a race and I got to go fast, and you just do it anyways? Where do you... Where the mindset would be like, where does she get off doing that? Because it is so hard to put yourself out there in that way. How do you get yourself to do that? Because I've seen you do it at the games numerous times. It's like an unknown implement. Okay. Like it's still for time. Where do you think that comes from?
That is a great question. I don't
it seems
know.
natural.
I feel like,
so it's like, I don't know, It's like an instinct or something, but it's really fascinating to watch, because if you take the opposite mindset, you're fucked no matter how skilled you are.
Yeah. So I guess looking back at past training, I would actually credit some of that to training, even having just back in the day when we had our group chat with all the Misfit athletes, and we would talk about bitch work, or I would have Travis come up and visit, or Travis and I would come to Maine and train together. Like he was that person, and he always kind of made you, him and Alexis, they always kind of made you level up to that standard of like, I'm going to go out hard and you're going to have to try and catch me. So I think that in training, and not doing it all the time, but having those moments or those periodic moments of doing it. And then I think with experience in competition of like, I know my pace. If I run my pace, just like you talk about all the time, if I go at my pace, it's going to be slower and it's going to set me off on the wrong foot. And I need to remember just how fit people are, and I need to level up to that competition. And I think I've gotten to that point too. Ironically, just talking about it with Gabe last night, where I'm also one of those people now that people are going to rise up to my level. So for me to go out sometimes a little too hot is actually going to set me back at this point. I think a good example of that is the ring muscle up workout, the 10th inning at Rogue.
I was watching and I was like, Paige, this math is not working out. Slow down.
Yeah. So, right. So, and again, that's me feeling like I need to level up to the competition. I was, a couple other factors in there as far as my back and all the hinging, but at the same time, it was CrossFit, and I went out a little too hot, as, using that as an example. That was one where I needed to kind of dial it back. But again, you go out on a 80-pound 1 mile run. If you start off slow and just trot through, you're not catching up to anybody. So just knowing that you need to level up to your competition every so often, I think is where that comes into play.
Paige, on this event specifically, there was a change on game day of the actual event, right?
Which one?
Of the logs and the sandbag.
Oh, yeah. So are you talking about the bar muscle up log, or the bar muscle up back squat, or the log in the dual?
The sandbag log.
Okay, so the dual.
Can you talk about your mindset shift from before the change to after the change? Because I think it was pretty significant.
Yeah, so they they took out the rope climb. So it was supposed to be over, under, over, one rope climb, any style, up to the 20-foot rig, come down, and then run to the sandbags, put the 3 in, and then time. So I was super excited about that. I thought having the rope climb in there was going to be a huge benefit for me. Like the strategy was, do you start off climbing legless? Do you use your legs when your speed slows down? There was a couple of factors going into that. But I knew that the sandbags were I thought that the rope climb would factor in for a lot of other people. I won't say names, but there are specific athletes out there who I was like, I don't think you'd be in the top 5.
I wonder
had
who.
the rope climb been in there. Overall, though, I thought that event was going to be really good for me, regardless of the rope climb being in it or out of it. We talk about, I've been playing sports since I was a kid. Like, that athleticism is still there, and I love when I actually get to showcase it every so often. So I was just like, send it. Like, you just have to run. Like, get over the logs, get under it. Like, keep your momentum coming out of the under, I think was the hardest part for most.
Paige,
and that's where you won or lost.
You looked really fast. I think I didn't know that you were fast.
I could be fast in
a fucking
I like
hockey
short,
player, Drew.
Yeah,
give her a
short,
break.
So quick.
short,
She's
powerful
hauling.
durations. Quick.
Yeah, got it.
Definitely. So you asked me to go run a 10K fast. No, that's not happening.
I mean,
but
you ran a
those
5K
short
pretty
durations.
fast at the CrossFit Games, so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. I just
Again,
meant like traditional
leveling up.
sports, like sprinting.
Yeah. So like Hunter said, that's what hockey is, right? It's kind of like that. You work hard for 45
Why isn't
seconds,
he
you rest for
fast?
90 seconds.
I watched him in the assault bike this morning. He looked pretty good, like 900
He
watts.
set himself up for that shit.
800, 900, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. That's a pretty shitty workout.
Calories per hour.
Yeah, what were you guys doing out there? I heard some people saying they were going to puke.
Maffin, it was great.
Yeah,
30 seconds on, 4.5 off.
on
Easy.
any machine or on the assault
It was
bike.
alternating
Alternate.
between air bike and ski erg. So 3 of each.
Ouch! I like that. That's nice.
It's a good
That's
dose.
Too bad I'm
fault.
sick. Damn. Total
Shucks.
bummer.
Paige, can you like, I don't, if I missed this, cause I actually scrolled back to the event, what was your, like, you were obviously like, were you disappointed that the rope climb was missing, or was it just like, well, fuck, now this is now a completely different workout is from a strategy perspective. And then it's like, is that frustrating? Like, is your initial reaction like, fuck, like, come on, like, what are we doing? Or is it like, what is that process?
Yeah.
Mentally, like,
I think Ben was probably angrier than I was that the rope climb was out because it was like every event that got changed in favor of like a bigger athlete. And that's not to say this, like, again, I'm on the smaller side of the spectrum in size. Like, I can handle a sandbag just fine, but, you know, they just can do it a little bit better. And, you know, they can kind of heave it and toss it right into the basket. And I have to get it up just that couple of inches higher, which, you know, can take a half a second or a second. So I was really bummed because I thought that actually could have been a home run workout for me with the rope climb in it. But again, knowing that they took it out, I still knew that it could be a great event for myself. And I tried so hard to get into that final, like that last, you know, 2-person heat.
What was the
and
time
I messed
difference?
up. So I think it was like a second or like 9/10 of a second, but I messed up on my last sandbag. Like I hit it into the basket instead of getting up and over enough. So that slowed me down.
What was how many advanced? Was it 2?
Yeah. So the final was a 1-on-1. Yeah, it was 2.
Yeah.
So it went
less than a second we're talking about. And
Yeah.
that, like just literally just bumping into that,
right.
whatever the apparatus was.
Yeah.
Was like
but
enough.
it was really impressive to watch because every heat seemed as everybody got faster. So even those that went the fastest, like Laura and Danny, still had their fastest time in the last heat going with the 1-on-1. So it was really impressive to see the times just continue to trickle down. I think that happened on the men's side too.
Drew, you're muted.
Fucking nerd.
Loser. I
2020?
think you can tell how well the program is, even though obviously that was accidental. Because watching you and Laura, obviously completely different strategies, right? Like you got to the bag so much faster than her, but her being able to do that, just like there were a few events, including the 10-rounder, that like just programming wise kind of got me thinking about like we're programming a 3-day competition in Colorado this coming summer that Preston's putting on. And when you watch things like that take place, those like what I call like equalizer type events, I think it's really interesting to see something like that happen where it's like you get there first and it's like, oh shit, can I get these bags in fast enough before Laura comes over and starts looking like she's tossing, a med ball into the thing before she runs across. But yeah, I thought that ended up being really, really interesting. And it's also cool to know that you can admit that you were pissed, that you wanted it to be some way. And then like, wow, this is fuel for the fire. Like if I wasn't already fired up to be, in this event and how cool it is and all that, now I'm a little angry. And I know that, for me personally anyways, in sports, when you can use it as opposed to letting it like control you, even though it's a pretty quick burning fuel, but in an event like that, like
it's
something
perfect,
that could work.
Yeah.
Fuck, it was
right?
9 100ths of a second. 100ths of a second difference between you and Laura.
Wow.
That's
not even.
Those are F1 times. It's quick.
Very, very fast. Yeah.
It was very cool. I think that style of event is really, really fun for the spectators. Maybe for the athletes, especially if you get knocked out early, it sucks to just sit there. You're sitting in a dugout where you can't even see the field itself, really. You have to go up on the field. But when you're in it like that, obviously it's, the adrenaline is there. The adrenaline was there right from the start. Like I flew over the log and just like my butt is still bruised, like to sit a certain way if I sit on the floor. But man, I just like, you couldn't stop. Like you couldn't even feel the pain of it. You just had to keep going. So it was really cool.
All right. Tell us about the deadlift event. I did not. So what was really cool about the content that you and Ted did with that event was we didn't get that vibe at all. You just kept lifting the bar really well and like taking it, like they would be like, Paige is taking her time. And again, there was no like context there. It's just like, if you don't have to rush it and you got to get, a belly full of air and make sure that you're set. But like, obviously there was a bit more to that story. Like you were dealing with, all of the like the clean and the snatch is one thing, but the emotions of like the movement, the one where you have to use your back quite a bit. If you want to tell us about your experience with the 1 rep max deadlift.
Yeah. So when they first announced those, I think it was like a week and a half or 2 weeks prior to going, I was looking through the events, and all of a sudden event 6 or event 7, whichever one it was, it just said 1 RM deadlift, and my heart just like sank into my belly, and I was just like, fuck, like that. I don't want to go into Rogue and do this event. So already right off the bat, I had a super just negative vibe going into it, negative perspective on it. But even with that, like, I wasn't going to let it deter me from going and let it deter me from trying. The whole weekend, Ben and I were just in agreement that if anything, and Gabe too, like, we were just, if something felt off, if it wasn't there, it wasn't there, and I wasn't going to force it. Like, this weekend was solely meant to be a green light to get back into training, not to be a setback. So we were in the warm-up area, and I actually need to give a lot of credit to this guy from Arasti. His name is Trey, and so a lot of my back issue, I think right now, has been more nerve, sciatic nerve. So he actually was like just doing a bunch of soft tissue work on like the entire nerve pathway from my calf all the way down or all the way up into my low back. And it was like pukey like feeling, like it wasn't fun. Like I wanted to just like wear my mouth guard and grit my teeth the whole time while he was doing it. But it felt amazing afterwards. So, with that, like having that body work done right on scene was really great. But so getting there, and knowing we've already done a ton of work, we've done a ton of hinging that day with the power snatches, like I was feeling it already. So, we started
There's only
warming
120
up.
of them.
It wasn't a lot at all, doesn't matter how light it is.
120.
It could be an empty barbell and it probably would have wrecked me.
Kidding.
Yeah. So, warming up, I just took a long sweat check. I did a bunch of activation work. We started warming up. I had my leather belt. Like I made sure I was bracing. A lot of my PT work with John here at home has been some rotational work, making sure that my spine is staying, together basically, and not rotating while I'm doing a bunch of rotational movements, and a lot of bracing. So I had a lot of that under my belt over the last 2 months. And so I start warming up the bar. Like it's literally at 135 and I'm like, Ben, I'm just putting my belt on because I'm that nervous about it. So like everyone's in there warming up, and then there's me with like my big lumberjack looking belt, and I'm at 135, and everyone's just like, Tia's deadlifting 400 pounds, no belt on. Like it's just wild. So I warmed up to 285 in the back. And then we're getting ready to go out, and they call us back and they're like, we're going to have a 30-minute delay. The internet is out. So again, like in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, now like a 30-minute delay is a long time. How do you stay warm? How do you not get back into your head of like, I just hit 285. I just want to go and try 305 and just start it and get it over with. So then we go back in the room. I just stay warm, get on a machine, keep doing some activation movements, some nerve flossing. And then I warmed up to 245 again. And I'm like, all right, let's just go back out there. Again, it was more mental than anything. So we get out there. I'm in line with Danny. I got Tia all in my heat, or in my lane. So just chit chatting with Danny pretty much the whole time of like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I don't even know if I'm going to pick up the 305 bar, but I went in, I braced, I stood up, I went down, and I was like, that actually felt great. I felt leg drive. I felt leg drive over anything. So it's like, okay, we'll go to 315. Same thing, still felt like I was using my legs, felt very comfortable being braced against my belt. So I was like, if it's still feeling like that, I'm going to keep going. And then it was like, well, now I just want to make sure I get enough girls off of like eliminated to a point where it's like, I can make this a top 10 event. So that ended up happening. There's 365, a couple of girls made it. And I was like, shit, I wanted to stop at 365 and just be done. So then I saw Paige Powers got knocked out at the 365 bar, and then I was the only one left in my heat of 4 people at the 375 bar. So I was like, do I do it? Do you guys want to see it? Do you want me to just be the only person going? So from that point too, it's kind of like do it from the spectating perspective of like, I can just be the only lifter, which always gives kind of a magical feeling. So that was kind of like my moment to shine on the deadlift. And again, it felt great. I was starting to feel a little like nerve tingling, a little like twinging in there. So I decided that that would just be my last lift. Although if I went to 380, it would have been like a 10th place to a 6th place, but it was a win over anything else. So the leaderboard number did not matter, which was a really, really cool feeling walking away from that event.
What was the most recent heavy pull you had done?
I cleaned 205. I think that was the heaviest I've
Like
done.
the same weight.
Yeah.
Like
Or maybe
recently?
195. Yeah. So I think the weekend before I built up to, I actually think it was a 195 squat clean.
That was the
and that's
heaviest thing you pulled off the floor since probably the games or close
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the heaviest at the games was 227. So again, still wasn't that much.
And what's your true 1 rep max deadlift?
So the best I had done was early 2021. I hit 396. So, I mean, I was still
about
up there.
95% of your 1 rep
Yeah.
max deadlift for having not pulled it in 5 months, 4 months.
Which is just insane. Like,
At
and
most.
again, a lot of like the mental side of leveling up to competition and just, I think just, you know, the magic that it is of being out there is, you know, something that I've always loved. And I think that that is, you know, that's where a lot of passion comes from too. But the adrenaline, I don't know. I can't explain it. You know, I think I look at Bethany Shadburn, who is also dealing with a back injury in a totally different capacity, didn't back squat any of the 260s in the log bar muscle up event, but she can go and smash 120 power snatches and finish the event. So it's just weird to see what things you can do and what things you can't do with a back injury.
You wonder sort of like self-imposed limits you put on yourself too, because you obviously need a decent amount of strength and stability in your spine to do 120 head whips with 65 pounds. It's interesting to hear you talk about that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things people can kind of get from what you just said is the power of possibility and the opportunity to see where you're at. If you're a competitor, like you should want to rise to that occasion. And while there's always self-doubt, you might experience self-doubt yourself. It's at all levels. It's one of those things where people think that like at your level, maybe you don't have that in you anymore. Like you sort of train that out of you. But I think that's probably the biggest thing I hear from this is that like, you know, if you're someone who's stuck at like a 190 pound clean or you've never snatched 145 before, whatever that is, like you have to try. You can't not try if you really have aspirations of seeing what your limits are. It's just putting the work in ahead of time, like all the PT work you put in, all the additional like conditioning you work. We always say that like getting fit is one of the best strength accessory programs you can do. Like how much that did for you, where you were able to go from, you know, 190 pound clean a couple weeks before to nearly 200 pounds heavier, having not done that in so long, is just a testament to understanding like how important it is to believe in yourself and to realize that that never goes away. That self-doubt never kind of fades. It's always part of you, but like learning to like, you know, turn that volume down and turn your self-confidence volume like sort of up, that internal dialogue of like, all right, maybe I can do this. And then when you have that moment where something breaks through, even if it's not a max lift, like a 305 deadlift for you is nowhere near a max lift, but like, hey, you hit 75, 80% of your max lift and it felt good. And all of a sudden, like now you add, you know, 70 pounds more to that where you thought like, all right, cool, I might do 305 and then maybe tap out at 315. Like there's a lot of value in understanding like what that headspace can do for you when it comes time to, you know, see what's possible.
Well, it's not like you stopped training either, right? It's like you took some time off after the games, but like eventually like you got back into it and maybe avoiding super heavy pulls from the floor, like very specific movements, but it's not like you were omitting other parts of your training, right?
Right. Yeah. And, a lot of I think the strongman has some transferability over to a deadlift. You're still working your central nervous system, all that stuff. So, like, we really took, going into the games, we took a lot of the sled work, the strongman implements, and really kept them in there and did progressions based off of those. And then kind of getting back into training post games, you took some time off, and then it was like, well, we know this stuff is stuff that I can get into right away. Why don't we just start to build some confidence back into training that way? So that was kind of how we started reintroducing strength work, was getting back on the sleds, the things that I've done, and then slowly turn that into, well, why don't we try and do 4 sets of 4 on snatch, and we'll keep the weight at a weight that feels good. And then we'll start to build from there. So we've kind of slowly, faded into that. And that's the start of phase 2. Now we're really just starting to get into the barbell work again.
Yeah, I think that's just like a really good point to hammer home for any athlete, is that you have to think about it in a bigger context, is that you've been competing in athletics for pretty much your whole life and competing in CrossFit for how long? Probably 10 years? Like about a decade?
7, yeah.
7. Okay, so 7 years of dedicated CrossFit training, and have obviously experienced bumps and bruises along the way, to the point at which, like, hey, certain movements are just not doable for a certain period of time. But continuing to train and continuing to just adjust focus to different areas of fitness is such a necessary skill for a competitive athlete to have, so that when it comes time to compete, it's like the body's pretty remarkable when one wants to compensate for something, for better or worse. Somebody, someone who can't deadlift or can't back squat a certain weight but can do 120 power snatches, like, maybe that's good, maybe it's not, but the point is that the body is really good at compensating. And two, the amount of time that you've put into training, just because you weren't deadlifting or weren't pulling something heavy off the floor, doesn't mean you weren't achieving other kind of metrics for success, working on conditioning, working on strength in different ways. And it's just a testament that says, like, hey, like, Paige has an elite level deadlift as a competitive CrossFitter, didn't do it for 3, 4, 5 months, and is within 5% of an all-time 6 events into a hinging heavy biased competition against the fittest women on the planet. And it's like, you can't make that shit up, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the high point to that.
Yeah, I think I remember I listened to a bit of a just recently Pat Vellner and Savon podcast, in hearing Vellner just talk about that he doesn't deadlift heavy, like, really at all. And I think it's just learning that about yourself, that you don't necessarily need to. Some athletes do, some athletes don't. And I think, I've learned that I don't need to put that extra emphasis on the heavy percentages as much as other athletes do. So, which allows me allows me to, put that time towards the machines and the things that I really do need to focus on, to see the improvement.
I think, excuse me, I think that there's something about, like, the way that you move, the way that Pat moves, and then, no offense to anyone else who was there, but there was some weird shit going on. There was some really weird shit going on. So, like, if you take an athlete that is consistently working on their accessory work, their strength in general, their GPP, their mobility, their stability, and then they go deadlift properly, which is, like, largely a physics equation, especially past the knee. Now I do care if you're listening. Fucking listen up. Jesus. So that to me is such a huge part of it, right? Like, if you can't express the skill of, point A to point B, then, like, should you I don't know that you should be deadlifting above 70% really at all. So
right.
That felt like a big part to me. And then the other question that I had was, we went and lifted with Mark Bell at Super Training, like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, something like that. And the takeaway that I got in the difference between them and CrossFitters was the care that they gave to individual reps, even while warming up. Like, at first it was kind of funny to watch. I mean, like hardos about like they're just 45s on the bar. But, you know, how you do anything is how you do everything. That's their sport. Like, they're trying to eke out pounds on this, like, what is seemingly simple lift, and that's their whole world. So you could think about how obsessed a CrossFitter could get if they narrowed it in on one movement. And when I watched you lift, I saw a lot of that. I don't know if that's like that was a silver lining at all. Like, you put on a bit of a class on like, how do you brace? How do you get leg drive? How do you use your levers from the knee to the hip to, like, yeah, you were potentially trying to be safe, but luckily safe in that instance is also like strong and powerful.
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I have a powerlifting background. I took time to kind of really improve on those movements and get stronger at them. But a lot of it too, a lot of coming to camp and getting some one-on-one work and just like small little tweaks and how to set up for a deadlift, and learning that, you know, from the mid shin position to the knee is more of a squat, like before you start to hinge, and just learning to get that proper leg drive has really come a long way. And that's how I focus on all of my deadlifts, is through the technique that I've learned from you guys and from some past experience. And then a lot of it too, I listen to all of the podcasts as far as the New Phase podcast. So obviously for me, we have our remote coaching meetings, but sometimes there's also really good tidbits that we may not touch on in our meeting that you guys touch on in the podcast. So for those out there listening, the podcast for A New Phase really is beneficial. And a lot of the accessory work that you would talk about, things like with a yoke carry and keeping it a bit looser and learning to fill your belly and brace against that, even though, you know, it's a bit looser. Like, a lot of that stuff was really all I was thinking about, was filling myself, bracing against the belt and using it to my advantage during those lifts. When I actually ended up hurting my back in April, I wasn't wearing a belt. And that's not like I know how to brace, right? But something just kind of went wrong that day. So now that's the biggest focus, is me bracing through those lifts. And even now on cleans and snatches, it's, you know, making sure I'm bracing and kind of stiffening everything out first. And a lot of the work I've been doing in PT has really focused on that. So, and I've been like religious 2 days a week to PT, because now I feel like I need it to continue this, you know, positive upward trend of getting better with my back.
I think that's one of those.
Oh, go ahead, Sherb.
I was just going to say the midline stabilization is like something we see at the affiliate level so much. And like one of my favorite things to do with athletes is when they walk in the gym and it's like deadlift day. It's like, hey, we'll get a belt. I'm like, tell me why you use the belt. What's it for? And they can't give me a good answer. I said, I don't let them wear the belt. I'm like, you have to go lighter and learn how to do this skill correctly, because you're going to develop your upper body and your legs much faster than your trunk musculature. And if you don't develop that trunk musculature, you are literally playing with fire. Every time you come in and try to pull a heavy deadlift could be the last time you do it for 6 to 12 months. You have to learn how to do this. And it's one of those things that has to be developed. And for a lot of athletes, it's just deliberate practice and body awareness, which is why the accessory work is so valuable. So, you know, if you're an athlete and you're wondering why you're not getting stronger in some of the more, you know, basic lifts like back squat, deadlift, snatches, and cleans, and you don't pay attention to accessory work, like, there's your answer. Do that stuff and do it more regularly. Learn how to brace with and without a belt so that you can use the belt to your advantage when necessary. But if you rely on it all the time, it's a crutch. It's going to lead you to be less efficient with bracing. And essentially, you're just, again, playing with fire, whether or not that allows you to do that long term.
Right.
Yeah, and I think like from just a longevity standpoint, a lot of times you get athletes, and I was going to allude to the affiliate level as well, where it's like there are elite level athletes who move poorly, who still move poorly. And like I was watching a little bit of the footage, and Danny Spiegel pulled 405, and absolutely nothing against her, because that was a tremendous lift, but like it's basically like a scoop, and all of a sudden we're in the power position and we're kind of gradually hoisting the bar up to completion, and it's like, that's a like good rep. hey, and then maybe in competition, that's just like, hey, I'm going for it, and if it's a little bit ugly, like that's gonna happen. I totally understand that, but people also don't understand that like oftentimes the safest way to do that sort of thing is also the most mechanically efficient, and like. You know, like Drew said, don't make me get a free body diagram out here and explain the physics of why that, you know, the deadlift is supposed to look a certain way. But like Sherb alluded to, it's like you have a finite number of those really questionable lifts of any variety before the chickens come home to roost. And like your 375 was still like mechanically very sound at 95% of, you know, an all-time best under the conditions that you were in. And I think it's just important for listeners to not say like, well, I saw so-and-so deadlift like this, or I see so-and-so do the bend and snap power snatch, so like I'm going to do that too. And it's like, you guys, you got to understand the difference between expressing capacity at the highest level with the intention of winning versus like the idea of training and understanding that there is a correct way to do things. And like, if that is your baseline, then you've kind of earned the right when it comes time to really step on the gas to maybe move a little bit suboptimally, because you've laid enough of the foundation of proper movement that it's probably not going to, you know, it's not even a chink in the armor. But if you move that way repeatedly, consistently in training, it's like that. It's just a matter of time before, like Sherb says, you've got an injury that's a hell of a lot worse than you would want it to be.
Right. I think too, like, you know, if I were a new athlete working with a remote coach and they showed me their 1 rep max deadlift or even clean and jerk and it was ugly, like, all right, well, let's take that down 10%, or if it's a deadlift, maybe even 20%, and use that as your 1 rep max, because you can have sound mechanics and then you're building off of the technique before you're building off of like the true strength of it. You know,
like to say like how well does it look versus like how heavy is it? Like I care more about it looking correct than how heavy you pull a deadlift. I mean, that goes for elite athletes and affiliate members. Like, I'm trying to set you up for long-term success. If you want to see yourself grow in this gym, either just to be healthy or to be perform at the highest level, you have to care. You have to give a shit about how you move.
Mm-hmm.
I've typed "it only counts if it looks like this" so many times into remote coaching sheets. Like, it's just why are we doing percentages based on, I don't know what that movement was that you just invented.
What is that?
So we well, actually I did have one note on that. I think it's not a coincidence that there are many athletes inside the top 10 in the sport that have some weird movement patterns, and none of them have ever come in first. Like, we do not have an example. Like, you could potentially go back to certain people in certain years in certain divisions. Not naming names when someone won the CrossFit Games is not nice. Just not cool. But, like,
OPT.
None of our examples on top of the podium move that way. None of them.
Yeah.
Zero. Zilch. You go through and you watch their movements. You're like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. And if they have a weakness, like their one weakness, it's like, oh, that doesn't look right. Something's a little off there. We don't get to do this often, but I do want to give a bit of a shout out to Gabe. Misfit OGs will obviously know. I'll knock him down a peg in the midst of it. Hold on.
Fuck you, Gabe.
I got this. Old school Misfits will know who Gabe is. Gabe's been with us for over 10 years. But now he puts his checkered shirt and Patagonia vest on and his loafers, and he goes in and does a 9 to 5.
Dockers.
Some Dockers. Dockers. How many people are going to know what that even means? My 70-year-old football coach used to say, make sure you wear Dockers. No dungarees, I believe is what he said. No dungarees. But some of the conversation that we had earlier about, like, what gives you the audacity to do this, some of that's got to come from Gabe. Gabe's style of coaching is like, he believes in you to a point where if you even utter like I don't know if I can do this, he in his own way is going to tell you that you can do it and that you will do it. And I think some of the mindset that you have in the changes I've seen you make in the last 5 or 6 years feel like there's some Gabe, sprinkling some stuff into the witch's
100%.
brew and stirring that up a little bit.
100%. Actually, in having, so obviously we had the conversation about Rogue, and then we also had a conversation later again that week talking about, do I want to do this again? Is this the way I want to go? And I think part of me threw him off a little bit that he wasn't expecting to hear those things. But I think also like he knows the reality of like, I'm 32. I want to get married and have kids one day. Like he knows all that stuff is there. And obviously there's a time and a place for all of that. And we're not at that place. But still the thought of competing was, I don't know, the reality is it could or could not happen. And I know he knew that, but I think deep down, he also still has such a strong passion of wanting to compete and wanting to do it again another year, which I also do too. So I think I threw him off a little bit, but like my biggest takeaway from the conversation we have was, whatever you take the time to decide on, like fucking commit to it, like don't leave it lingering, or training is going to suck for those weeks that you're just in a position of like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Like having those, and he's absolutely right. Like having that week or two where I was like really uncertain of what I wanted to do, training was terrible. Like it was just, I didn't want to go in the gym. It was miserable. And being able to lean on him and have a hard conversation like that was really, really, you don't always get that kind of openness or that, willingness to be okay with whatever the decision is. Some people can be so like hard set on wanting you to do something that they want you to do, and not necessarily because you have the passion for it. And he's, so far from that. And, I think that will make him, when his kids, are deciding on sports, makes him a great dad to be open-minded and give both sides of the perspective.
That stuff never works. If you want it more than the athlete, it never works. Like,
right.
There's been circumstances in the past where athletes have this like idea that, I want to run the CrossFit Games, and then they, aren't willing to commit what it takes to get there, and have a season that goes past, and it's like, oh, if I make this one change, and they're excited, as soon as the season rolls over, like, oh, the game just happened, I'll do it this year, and then like 3 weeks in, they don't want to commit to that, and it feels like either, typically it's the athlete not wanting to meet the coach at the 50-yard line, and that's the reason why they don't, meet their goal. And it has to be a 50-50 agreement. You can't have one person committing more than the other, or it's never going to work. And that goes for parenting too.
I have a question that's potentially more fun than some of the other ones. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, day 2 of the CrossFit Games was the Alpaca Day. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that your best day of competition that you've ever had?
Yeah.
That was so
really
fun
awesome
to
day.
watch. Just like, if you really know the athlete and know what they work on and what's a strength and what's a weakness and their mindset and all of that stuff, and then you get to see this, like, there was something about that day that was like, to me, watching the ultimate manifestation of like so many different things, especially with the back injury.
Yeah. In that event, like, obviously I failed a rope climb, right? But like, I took that to an absolute limit that I've never actually pushed myself on before. And that was, again, whatever the placement was on the leaderboard, like, that's not the win. The win was the being able to take it to this point and take that little bit of a risk and seeing what you're capable of. So yeah, that was a really, really cool day at the games.
Well, the response from people wasn't like, "Oh, damn, you were so close." It was like, "Oh, you were so fucking close!"
Oh my god,
the threshold was like the exact line. Like, it couldn't have been closer.
It sucked, but my judge obviously made the right call.
We didn't think so.
She did. From where I'm standing, I can be honest about that. And she was rooting for me too, right? Like, she didn't want to have to call that. Yeah. You have certain judges that are out there, and like, they could be so like, focus on what they're doing, but like, they can still be kind of rooting for you, which is pretty neat because they might not show it, but you can kind of feel the vibe of it. So yeah, it was a cool day. Yeah, I want to do it again.
Good. Good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You guys got anything else before final thoughts? Any more questions?
I mean, the only thing I'm curious about, Paige, is you said you spent a lot of the last season working on the mental side of the game. For anyone that's maybe not familiar, what did that look like for you? Is that like reading? Is that journaling? Is that, getting a therapist and talking to them? Like, what does that look like for yourself? So, like, how did they get manifested, basically? What did you do to work on the mental side of the game?
So a lot of it this year, I think, was more of just leaning on the people around me. So being able to lean on Ben a little bit more, especially on like really hard days, when I wanted my back to be in a position to do something and I couldn't do it, and leaning on Gabe a little bit more than I had in the past. So this year brought in definitely the most communication him and I have had throughout our years working together. And that was just making sure that we're checking in. I've cried to him a lot over the year, and that's not typically how my relationship has been. But he would, we bleed for this, blood, sweat, and tears. Like that's really what we put into this season. And so for me, again, it was more of the just leaning on the people that are close, and having them be ready to like change things when they needed to change. So like, me and Ben would go into the gym and start a training session, and all of a sudden I just have to make like a 180 pivot and do something else completely. And he was just open and willing to help me make the changes that I needed to make, whether that meant we had to drive from the gym and go over to the trail and do some running instead. He's just, Ben is just super open and flexible on that stuff, and always made me feel okay about changes that I had to make. And Gabe was the same way. So as far as like having to make programming changes, more so on the fly than anything, like they made me feel okay about it, and they made me feel like I wanted to go and do the work that they're changing for me because they're putting in the effort too. So there was, you go 50 yards, I go 50 yards. And that happened throughout the whole season, which really, really, made a big difference. And as you guys know, people that know Gabe, like he doesn't care. Like if you're going to change up the work, he doesn't care. Just go do it, and go do it with the effort and the passion that you have. Yeah, exactly. And as we're getting into phase 2, we've actually just been talking about this. I'm not so much a morning person. I'm sure other people out there are like that too.
Ted is.
Big morning guy.
Big morning
But
guy.
again, so I've committed to 2024. So again, if I'm going to commit, I'm going to fucking commit. And for him, part of, asking me before we ended our conversation last night was, what can I do for you from here that would help? And I told him, like, I'm not a morning person. I don't necessarily want to get up early and go to the gym, but I do want to change my morning routine a little bit, because I would get up, I'd have breakfast, do whatever, and then I'd go on my computer. And I wanted to stop doing that. Like, I want to stop doing that. So, one of the things that I said, well, maybe I can text you every morning with having done something as far as training and being productive towards training instead. So as much as I'm not a morning person, I can still get up and do something. So we're starting off with in the mornings, like before I coach the 9 a.m. class at our gym, I do that Mondays and Tuesdays, and alternate on Fridays. So those days I'm going to get up early. I'm going to go in, I'm going to warm up for 7 to 10 minutes on a machine, and then I'm going to get into accessory work. And I'm going to go in, do my accessory work. I'm going to write up a whiteboard so that I can mark things down, and I'm going to send him a picture of that whiteboard every single morning. So that's the one change that I want to start with for phase 2, so that I can start, getting back into the routine for, solid training sessions, going forward as the season progresses and, training really starts to kind of ramp up.
You heard it here,
retoolings are really
folks.
cool.
It's the sexy stuff. It's the super, like, she's doing backflips right out of bed. No, she's not. She's getting in and she's getting to work on stuff that's going to keep her healthy throughout the year. I was going to yell hooray or do a slow clap, but I tried my best to let you finish.
Try it, I'll join.
Yeah, so this morning, I went in, I got on a machine for 7 minutes, and I did 5 minutes of dead hangs. I did 4 sets of dumbbell heavy press holds, bench press holds, and some anterior tib raises, which those are deceiving.
Yes, they are. Those burn.
But again, so I did that. I sent him a pic of my whiteboard, and I went and I coached, and then I came here and started talking with you guys. So it was, the thing that we had talked about was I had said, maybe there will be days where I go and do more. But if I'm going to do more, like say a conditioning piece, if I'm going to do that and commit to doing that in the morning, I need to make sure that I give it the proper treatment that I would give a training piece at 2:00 in the afternoon, a proper warm up, a little bit of activation work, and then get into it. So I will have mornings that I do that. And, he's like, don't do what I do and just go in and say you have 30 minutes of time. Like,
get a hernia.
So I'm also at a point where I'm just wired to do something to get a sweat check. Like I will go to my grave having like sweat check written on my gravestone. Like it's in me to warm up. So so that's just, I can't go into something anymore without having intention of doing it well. So the reason we're starting with the accessory work is the idea of reducing friction. So don't try to, start off with something too big that I can't sustain. So starting small with, accessory work and keeping it a little bit lower intensity and having days where the intensity for a morning piece will be higher.
It's kind of like that 2-minute rule from Atomic Habits, where it's like, hey, you want to go for a run, you start by putting your running shoes on, going outside for 2 minutes, and then you fucking stop. And you're like building the habit of like getting into that groove where you're starting small is probably.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, sounds like that's like the perfect way to set yourself up for success. It's not like the goal wasn't get up, do 3 training pieces first thing in the morning because my morning routine sucks. It's like, I need to change it a little bit. And here's like a solid, like relatively low barrier to entry thing that I can definitely do that will definitely benefit me, but also isn't like, I'm not going in to do a bike sprint. I'm not going in to do heavy deadlifts. I'm not going in to do something that has like, that you have like almost like self-worth or, deep training value attached to it. Not that accessory work isn't obviously valuable, but it's like this. It's a great barrier to entry sort of thing where it's like not a lot of stress, not worried about hitting specific numbers. You can go a little bit by feel, and at the end of it, like I've checked off a major box, been productive, feel better, like great.
Yeah.
I don't want to skip over the it takes a village.
Sweaty corpse?
No. It takes a village thing. You talked about how you got into the mindset, and a lot of it was the people around you. We get such a great example here because we've had a bunch of games athletes come from our gym. So you see what happens very much on the local community level. You see what happens at the misfit level. Then you see what happens at the like the whole crew, the whole squad. It could be, a PT person or your aunt is showing up or whatever it is. And I still see quite a few athletes that like, because they haven't found their tribe or their village, that they think that that's not really like them. And I think it's probably more of like obviously you want to feel like you fit in with whoever you're working with. And a lot of times you'll see an athlete with a crew and you're like, that does not add up. And that's a 1-year experiment right there. But then you wouldn't want them to think that that's not what it takes to go there. You see the lone wolf athlete, and a lot of times it's like they're referred to as the ones with potential that don't necessarily make it all the way through. And it's like, I encourage anyone that feels like they're not reaching their potential, that has a bit of that lone wolf mentality. Like, it's totally fair that there was a swing and a miss at some point with a coach or a significant other or even a gym community. You know, everyone's, you know, been privy to a toxic gym community, whatever it is, but like, keep searching for that, keep trying to find it, because these moments that happen, we talk about scary season, we talk about when you feel like you can't execute at like the highest level and you're having a panic attack at a competition, like those are the moments where the village like swoops in and reminds you sort of who you are. So, again, we see it pretty regularly at a fairly high level, these people sort of off in the corner by themselves. And it's probably not a coincidence that they don't end up doing quite as well as they potentially could.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that too, right? Like I have Gabe and I have Ben, I have my mom, like those are people that I, you know, really heavily rely on. But I also have a community at Vertex that, you know, is very much unlike any other, as, you know, anybody who is very much tied into their community would say. But that took time to build too. You know, it's not like you just randomly fall into this thing. Like you have to build relationships and, you know, build that rapport with people. And if you, like, for me, I think a big part of it too is that I still coach. So I still get this, I still have this relationship with people where I can relate to them on their level, and then they support me at the level that I compete at. So, you know, I definitely am super fortunate to have that. And I hear a lot of athletes now that basically don't go to their affiliate anymore. Like you never really hear about affiliates as much, you know, or athletes within their affiliate at this level, right? Like I think recently there was an athlete who was just like, I won't go to the gym anymore because I don't feel peaceful there. I'm like, if I don't go and talk with these people,
find a new gym.
Yeah. Like
change your fucking
I don't know.
attitude.
It's just, it really blows my mind. And I think that is, you know, part of almost like you're too cool for school. And I never want to feel that way. And I never want the affiliate that I'm at or the members that I'm around, I never want them to feel that way either. Like I always want them to feel like they can come up to me and, you know, ask me a question or ask me how my back is doing or, you know, ask me for help on something. Like I never want that to go away. And same thing with the people that I coach with, you know, like I want to always feel like I'm part of a team with them. But again, the biggest point of that was it takes time to build that up. It wasn't just something that, you know, I fell into. Like, you know, it took a lot of time to grow into something like that.
Yeah, you definitely, it's very clear that you put the work in with them to reciprocate. And then they do deserve a special shout out. I've seen a lot of the communities, they do go above and beyond, even
they do.
Like further than a lot of the amazing support systems that I've seen. So you're right in giving them kind of a special classification, I think.
We've got a little village for the Lone Wolves over at discord.gg/Misfit Athletics.
We do.
In case anybody's looking for a village.
That's true.
That is very true. All right, final thoughts. If I need to go first, I will.
I'll go. I think one of the cool kind of overarching themes from the conversation is just resilience and being willing to just go and do things and find a way to make things work that I think has allowed you to maintain the fitness you were maintaining throughout this period of injury with the back, and then being able to go to the CrossFit Games and, you know, hit some pretty heavy lifts for yourself, even though probably less than you would want to ideally hit at the CrossFit Games, but still being willing to find a way to make it work instead of just giving up hope, which I think is an unfortunate thing you see with a lot of athletes is they have a setback and then it's just like they throw the papers in the air and fuck, it's all over. You know, finding ways to get creative, whether that's, you know, using a belt squat or pushing a sled or doing a shit ton of accessory work or just getting really fit as fuck, like goes a long ways towards making sure that you kind of find a way to make it happen. And if you truly have big goals, you have to be willing to do that. Otherwise, you know, you're not going to get to where you want to be because setbacks are going to happen for athletes at all levels at some point in their career.
I think along those lines, we're one of the things that you've always been really good at, Paige, in my mind, and something that I'm not particularly good at is asking the question of like, well, what can I do? And it's similar to the resilience thing Sherb is talking about, but it's not so much like I can't do this, I can't do that. It's what can I do? What can I be doing to move the needle? Can I adopt a new morning routine that's beneficial to my training? Can I work on certain things that aren't necessarily directly related to, you know, my deadlift or to getting stronger specifically? Instead, like, what are the things that I can focus on that are still going to move the needle for me based on my experience as an athlete, the time that I've put in, the amount of my kind of training age, all of those things, just being able to say like, well, what are the things that I can do in order to move the needle? Not so much as what, like, I'm restricted by this, I'm limited here, I'm limited there. It's like, well, yeah, those things are real, but I can also, that just means I can pay attention to other things. And it's much more of a, like, you know, what am I able to do to move the needle, rather than sitting and pouting about what am I limited in right now. And I think that's a huge, that has to be part of part of the reason you've been competing at such a high level for such a long time and are still trending upward.
So the Must Be Nice crowd, first and foremost, like, I want you to visualize me shadow boxing, like really getting into it, because you people fire me the fuck up. But I am going to throw you a bone today. If we were to zoom way, way out, which I think they do a little bit too much, Paige, you were top 20 at the CrossFit Games. You just went to Rogue and got to compete at this really cool event. Must be nice. Like, Division I hockey player, great genetics, must be nice. Like, what the fuck? Why can't I do that? Why can't I be that? Today we zoomed in, and honestly, not even far enough for this story, but we showed how somehow easily your most challenging year had so many pieces in them that were so much more meaningful than other years. How you had your best expression of yourself as an athlete out on the competition floor in the midst of all of this. Those silver linings are there, and it just gets us back to the idea that we are capable, all of us, every single human being is capable of doing hard things. And the harder the thing, the greater the reward out the other side, right? So it's like, in the moment, this sucks. This isn't worth it. Why am I doing this? I really thought today was the day that I was going to warm up and my back was going to be okay. And semifinals is right around the corner. The games is right around the corner. Rogue is right around the corner. And like, in that moment, what's worse? What's worse than that feeling when they announced the deadlift? But then what happened in the deadlift, what happened at semifinals, the CrossFit Games, and at Rogue. So if you find yourself in that mindset, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It could be your career. It could be a physical pursuit. Doesn't matter. Do hard shit and realize that the reward on the other side, no matter what, is going to be there, because that's what human beings are supposed to do, what they're capable of, what is just an expression of who we are. And you were able to put that on display, I think, for yourself, most importantly. And then now that we get to recap on it for other people. And there's nothing more meaningful than our examples of, like, I could never do what she did. And then you just come in with like the most relatable story after story after story about training and personal life and all that stuff. And it's like, oh, so she just kept with it and continued to work hard and had a good attitude.
Do hard shit.
She's a human too. Got it. Mm-hmm. I think to tie all those things together, do hard shit, find ways to get the training done, find routes that you can still do things, and being resilient. I think a lot of those things, like, those can tie into being vulnerable and being able to put yourself out there. So whether, again, it's in a work-related endeavor or it's in the gym, you have to be vulnerable. I mean, someone like Tia Toomey, fittest on earth, coming back from pregnancy, she's probably nervous as hell about competing again, and, you know, all the things that people are saying. But again, she's putting herself out there, and that's the best thing you can do. To do hard shit, you just got to put yourself out there, and lean on lean on your people.
Ted, you got anything?
Yeah, I just want to thank Paige for coming on, and thank you for your humbleness and your openness as an athlete and as a person. I think that a lot of younger athletes that are coming into the sport should take a note from your general way of being, your general mindset. I think it's more humble confidence than anything. You know what you're capable of, but you don't feel like you're better than anybody, which just makes you enjoyable to be around. So we appreciate you being here and showcasing that for us.
Yeah.
And, you know, at Rogue throughout the weekend, obviously Jen and I were there, and it was great to see you in between events and just kind of the way that you process the events and the way that you mentally prepared for the coming events. Just fun to watch.
Yeah. Thanks. I do remember, just a quick one, the deadlift event was the last event of the day. And that's all I thought about as I woke up that day. And Gabe was like, if you fucking say the word deadlift again before the event starts, you owe me $20.
That sounds right. That sounds right.
But no, it was
I think
good. Thank you guys.
I think that's a perfect ending.
Well, thank you.
He was
Thank you guys for
definitely going
having
to
me on
take your
too.
$20 too.
Oh,
There's no
100%.
question that he was going to take
I'm
that.
going to send you an invoice immediately. All right. Great episode. Did we do it?
We did it.
Thank you for tuning in to
and-
another episode of the What's up, Paige?
No, I was going to say, anybody in Discord, if you're listening and you want to reach out to me directly, I'd be happy to talk to anybody or, shoot the shit.
Do it.
Careful what you wish for.
Thank you for
I would
tuning in
also
to
like
another
that.
episode of the Misfit Podcast. And thank you to our show sponsors. You can head to properfuel.co, use the code word PAGE to save, donate some money to Paige. You can head to sharpentheaxeco.com, use the code word PAGE, save some money, donate some money to Paige. And you can go to misfitathletics.com for your individual programming needs. Follow the program that Paige is following right now. Phase 2 is in week 1 or 2, depending on when you listen to this. 2-week free trial. And if you were looking for affiliate programming, you can find that at teammisfit.com. Thanks again, Paige. Thanks again to everyone for listening. We'll see you next week.